I hope everything is going well in your world, especially when it comes to monsters hunting. Doing so many video games. Are you a video game player yourself? Is my first question.
Absolutely, I am. I've been involved in 3 video game adaptations. Mortal Kombat, which was my first American movie, Resident Evil, and now Monster Hunter. And, I came to all of those games. I came to all of those movies through gaming. I was a huge fan of Mortal Kombat. I played it in the arcades in London. I kind of disappeared into my apartment and played the first 2 Resident Evil games back to back and became obsessed with them and the idea of turning them into a movie. And I played my first Monster Hunter game in Japan 12 years ago, when it was very much a kind of Japanese only phenomena and relatively unknown outside of Japan. And I played it and just immediately fell in love with it. These epic landscapes and these giant creatures that roamed through those landscapes. I thought it was incredibly cinematic. And I thought this is a whole new, fresh world that people would love to discover. And if I turned it into a movie, it's a world that I think people would love to kind of immerse themselves in for 2 hours.
Now, speaking of, Monster Hunter and just the monsters and the size, what was it you wanted to do with the size of these creatures? Of course, coming from video games, we see how it kind of reacts to your playable character, but also you want to make them almost even bigger than that, almost too, correct?
The size matters. So, we definitely wanted to play into the size of the creatures. And that's why, we also wanted to film on these real natural landscapes, to make the creatures as realistic as possible. I felt if we, I feel like there's 2 ways to make a big movie like this. You can either shoot it on a studio backlot against a green screen and then create the landscapes in a computer. But then everything has a kind of slightly synthetic feel to it. Or you can really go for the reality of it and try and make the creatures as photoreal and as realistic as possible. And I think that requires shooting on real locations. And that's what we did. We tried to bring this otherworldly Monster Hunter world to life. We tried to find the most epic locations on this earth that we could find.
When it comes to, creating something from these video games too, is there always the possibility of going too far down the rabbit hole? Trying to assuage not only the moviegoers but also the video game lovers and the people who love the franchise.
I think you have to make a really entertaining movie first and foremost. It's not a checklist of things that you must do from the video game to turn into a movie. Check, 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 check. You've got to create something that's entertaining and fun, which I think we definitely did with this. And at the same time, you have to, while making a fun movie for people, that fun movie has to work for 2 different kinds of audiences. It has to work for the hardcore fans who know everything about the video game, everything about the world you're adapting. But then it must also work for the mainstream moviegoers who don't know anything about the world. And you don't want to make them feel excluded. You don't want to make them feel like, oh, I don't play the game, therefore this is not for me. This is an amazing, fun world that looks epic. And I want everyone to be able to appreciate it and discover the world of Monster Hunter, whether they play the game or not. So, you're always trying to fashion something that works for both audiences and pleases both audiences. And that can be a fine line that you walk and a hard path sometimes. But that's, I've been doing it for 25 years and hopefully I've got some experience in that.
So what are some of the physical things that start to get you really excited, so you can almost imagine the world for the audience? I mean, like, let's say weapons or vehicles, or even, just the grit of the sand as you walk through it. So what is it that really kind of gets you excited once you kind of see that physical form?
Well, the monsters are a must, but they're going to be created always in a computer. So, the first thing for us was the choice of locations, was to find locations that matched the epicness of the world of the video game. And to do that, we went on a big location scout, and invariably the most epic looking locations were incredibly remote. So to capture them, we would end up kind of going to these locations that were hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the nearest habitation. And the cast and crew would all have to live in a tent village that we erected. We'd dig a well so there would be water. We'd all live like that, no internet, no cell phone reception for kind of months at a time. And, that was hard filmmaking. But the upside was we captured these incredible landscapes that really brought this other world to life, I thought, in a very, very photoreal way. And also it really helped the monsters, because when we put the monsters in those landscapes, the animators were matching into reality rather than just trying to match into a green screen. And for me, I found that exciting, but also the actors found it exciting. It was easier for them to imagine being immersed and thrown into a brand new epic world when they were being thrown into a new world. Some of them flew from America or Japan, and they, a day after landing at the airport in South Africa, they were in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of like these epic landscapes in the heart of Namibia or South Africa that quite often had never been put on camera before.
So, when you have action stars like Mila and Tony, what is it that you try to do first to connect them? Do you get them in the costume first to connect them? Do you have like a talk, or, what are those frank talks you have in the middle of nowhere when there's no internet?
Well, with Tony, it was the big bonding moment was when I had to give him the giant weapons, the great bow and the great sword that he wields. I mean, these were huge weapons. It's one of the signatures of the video game, of the outsized weaponry. And I needed an almost superhuman man to really carry those weapons. Because it's one thing playing with those weapons when you're in a video game and your character is made out of pixels and you don't have to obey the laws of gravity. It's quite another when you have to give like a giant sword that's 8 feet long to an actor and it weighs a ton, and he has to run in the sand, and you say, okay, now you've got to go for it. You have a lot of complex action choreography as well. That's when you're glad you're working with someone like Tony Jaa.
So it is taller than him then, is what I'm looking at this picture.
Oh yeah. And I gave him that great sword, and after a few minutes he'd mastered it. It was super impressive to see him twirling it around, and I said, that's great, Tony, because I've got bad news for you, because you also have to carry this great bow. And I gave him the bow, and he's like, now I need to think about this a little more. But he did a fantastic job managing to wield the both of them.
For sure. And then the last thing, it's been 25 years since Mortal Kombat 2. You mentioned earlier. Is there still something about that shoot, as a director, that still makes you smile, like just a perfect day, or something behind the scenes, or something that you still it still brings a grin to your face?
I loved making that movie. It was my first kind of big studio movie. I met some great people on it. I'm still very, very good friends with Robin Shou, who played Liu Kang, and Lyndon Ashby, who played Johnny Cage. Christophe Lambert was the biggest star I'd ever worked with at that time, and he couldn't have been nicer. And we went to some epic locations in Thailand. I mean, what was not to love about making that movie? I mean, I had a thoroughly good time making it, and people really seemed to love it when it came out, and still have a lot of affection for it. So I've got nothing. All you have to do is say Mortal Kombat, and I smile. It's even better if you go Mortal Kombat.
You got to find that's the voice you have to find right now, because that is synonymous with the amount of just the sound of quarters going into a 7-Eleven coin op. Those are the sounds of Mortal Kombat in my life. That Mortal Kombat yell, and then quarters going away from my pocket. So yeah, I think you delivered really well on that, as well as some other ones too. There's some different titles that I know they landmark different things. Event Horizon is definitely one of the horror movies in my life that I point to when I say you want to be scared, you want to be freaked out. Like, that's one of those movies I point to for sure. I want to thank you very much. I hope you are, all of your people are happy, healthy, and well. And more importantly, hope you have an amazing day.
Thank you so much. And you.
Pleasure.